My name is Howard Linder.
Howard, are you from Gallipolis originally?
No, I was born in New Vienna, Ohio.
Okay.
I moved here in 1984.
Okay. Where's New Vienna?
It is northeastern Ohio.
Okay, near Cleveland.
No, it would be further east than that. Probably east of Columbus a ways.
Okay. And you're here because of our process of River Tales interviewing about the Vietnam War. Now, were you drafted for the war, or did you enlist?
Technically I enlisted. Actually, I got a letter saying that I would be drafted as of a certain date, but I'm an MD, and I was graduating from medical school and internship at the time, and they said if you'd like to, be drafted by report at such and such station. However, in view of your training, if you would like to accept a commission in the U.S. Army, then please go to Fort Bliss, et cetera, et cetera.
Were you at Ohio State Medical School, or were you some other medical school?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Medical School, okay. And we're talking, is this 1960s?
I graduated from medical school in 1965, so so I served a year of internship. So this is would be the end of July, end of June, 1st of July in '66.
Okay, so you're basically when the buildup is already taking place in Vietnam.
Right. I went over with the 9th Infantry Division when the whole division moved over, and they activated that.
And do you recall where they sent you to?
Well, yes, we spent a month getting there. They sent the whole division over in ships. We landed at a place called Vung Tau on the coast, and then we were moved to a place called Bearcat, which is not too far from Saigon.
And did you do any training in the States before you went? Did you go through the regular basic training like everyone else?
Right. We went through some basic training, Fort Sam Houston, and we did some tropical medicine training also there.
You were with other doctors, as a matter of fact?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Then you shipped over with the division, and then you were, after you got to Vietnam, what was your responsibilities? Were you let's say, were you in a city, were you in the villages, where were you?
We were in a place called Bearcat, which was a base established, and they were just beginning to build it up. Originally it was about, a mile or two square, and it was probably closer to 25 or 40 by the time I left. So it was a rapid build-up of that area, and most of the time that was our base camp.
Okay. Did you spend most of your time there in taking care of soldiers, or?
I had mainly sick call. I was a general medical officer, so we did sick call and took care of illnesses and some triage and whatever was needed to be done.
There was probably advantages to being an officer too, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What rank were you getting, lieutenant?
We went in as lieutenant, and on going to active duty, I became a captain.
Captain, okay. So you were a captain, let's say, and would become a MASH unit then?
It was, yes, it would be close to a MASH unit, right? It would be a medical company.
Okay.
In there.
Now, how long did you serve in Vietnam?
I was there for 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah. We left in November and we arrived in December, and so I was there until a year later, right?
So you're talking probably December or January 67, 68?
67, yeah.
Okay, you left before the Tet Offensive then?
I left about 2 weeks before the Tet Offensive, right?
And it's probably quite propitious that you did, as a matter of fact.
Yes, but I didn't know it was going to happen, of
Right.
course,
Well, yes.
till I was already gone.
The American military didn't know it was going to happen either.
Right. Yes.
But you did get to treat, let's say, soldiers who were in combat.
Yes, we did.
What was that experience like?
Well, it wasn't particularly pleasant. I remember one particular episode where they had knocked out a couple of tanks, and we had a number of casualties, etc., and we had to do some paperwork and notifying families, etc. Most of the real major stuff was treated at the front lines by probably the medics. We had like 110 medics in the company and 4 doctors, and we were one stage back from the lines, basically. So I didn't see too much a major medical trauma because it was picked up by helicopter and taken immediately to the base hospital. So, but any moderate things and all sicknesses and any minor injuries and stuff I would handle.
How were you affected by this?
Well, I felt sorry for the people of Vietnam, frankly, when I was first there, and I was. It was nice to be working in the unit. We lived basically in tents most of the time, but they weren't too bad, and we, had regular meals. And I only went out to field with the troops a couple of times. Most of the time I was either in a base camp or in a forward base camp, temporary base camp. And then we were very busy when the troops came back in from a mission, but most of the time when they were out in the field, we didn't have a lot to do.
Did you experience any post-traumatic stress disorder? Did you see it? Did you?
I didn't see very much immediately to deal with there. We had, towards the second half of the year, we started doing what we called medcap missions. Basically, we'd go to a village and we would do sick call for the village. And a time or two, we got a little bit ahead of the front lines. Whatever the front lines were, they were not well defined. But we did get to a village or two that none of the other soldiers had really gotten to when we went there. And it was a little uneasy feeling. But there were, you treated general medical conditions from minor abscesses to anything you could handle, basically, for the civilians.
Now, your experience in Vietnam, how did it help define you for the rest of your life? Or did it in any way, shape, or form?
Well, it certainly made me more empathetic to the Vietnamese. I did have time to learn at least some basic Vietnamese and got to the point where I could do general conversation. And so sometimes they used me not only as a medical officer, but occasionally to interpret the interpreter. There are idioms in the language which don't translate directly. And after a while I got to where I knew the idioms, and the Vietnamese translator would give you word for word, which didn't make sense. An example might be, you say, I go buy sell, which it's an idiom for I'm going shopping. And so once in a while I would help the interpreter basically put it in English that would be more easily understandable. Also, if you know the language a little bit, they have what's called a noun modifier in front of every word, sort of like a herd of deer, a school of fish. We only have a few examples of that in English, but in Vietnamese, every word has a noun modifier. Every noun has a noun modifier. But the North Vietnamese dialect has a different noun modifier than the South Vietnamese dialect. So you spend 1 minute with a person and you know immediately where they were born and raised in Vietnamese.
Interesting. Now, from your service, did you, since the time you got back, did you spend time afterwards, the rest of your life, reading about Vietnam, reading, let's say, like Philip Caputo's book, Rumor of War? Did you watch movies? Did you pay attention to the war? Did it affect you in that way?
I did not. I basically didn't really want to do that. So I had made some friends there that I never knew what happened to them, of course. But there was no real way to communicate or write letters or anything back and forth, and so it just kind of gradually went away.
So with the internet, did you ever make contact with any of your former...
No, I did not.
Not at all, okay. Have you ever gone to any sort of, let's say, VFW post or any kind of, let's say...
I did not, no.
Okay. When you came back, did you experience any hostility from people back home, anti-war protests?
I did not. I knew they were going on, but I was never particularly involved in it, and I didn't really have any particular hostility directed at me personally.
How did you feel about the anti-war protests?
I didn't have a lot of sympathy for them, but they were going on, but I wasn't there, and I wasn't in the city where they were happening, and I didn't pay too much attention to them.
So, for example, if I throw a name out, let's say Abby Hoffman or Jerry Rubin, you have no inclination to,
I didn't get involved in that.
okay, but your impression of them, let's say, and what they were doing, there's the belief that the anti-war protesters were also patriotic and they're standing up against the war, as much so, if not, maybe not as much, but as patriotic as those who went to fight in the war. How do you feel about that?
I think it was illogical. We were there, and we were soldiers, and we did what we were supposed to do, and we obeyed orders, and didn't have much to say politically.
Now, when you came back, eventually made your way to Gallipolis in 1984. How'd you do that?
Well, I came back and I served my second year basically at a little place in El Paso, Texas, Fort Bliss, I believe it was. And I was general medical officer there, and I served there for several months, and then I extended 6 months because I couldn't go into my residency training until July, and I had gone in close to December. So I didn't have anything to do between December and July, 1 July. So I went ahead and extended, and they made me chief of the medical dispensary system there at Fort Bliss. So I did that, and then I got out at the end of that. I didn't particularly enjoy having to go where they wanted me to go and not being able to make any particular plans on my own. Some people liked having things structured. I didn't particularly, but I obeyed it. And then when I was out, I went into residency training and then specialty pulmonary training, and spent 10 or 15 years in St. Louis, and then I had an opportunity to come to Gallipolis and joined Holzer Medical Clinic in '84, and I worked there since then.
Okay.
Retired about 3 or 4 years ago.
Was there any skills that you picked up working in the Vietnamese environment that you could use in your practice later?
Well, made you a little more attuned to parasite disease and to tropical illnesses, which would be rare here, but there were a number of people that had come back and forth, and some that had traveled to other countries, that you at least had a level of suspicion a little higher for those, and you were more familiar with some of the symptoms that might be associated with that you wouldn't normally see too much in the U.S. And I got to sew up a lot of lacerations and things, but I would probably do that in the U.S. anyway.
But any kind of scenes or stories you'd like to share with us that you have resonated with you over the years?
Well, we had there was a big operation and a large fight and a number of casualties, and they brought in basically Vietnamese soldiers, etc., both north and south, basically, to our facility for treatment. And I remember one young lady who came in primarily because she had a gunshot wound to the leg. She had been abducted from her village. At that time, the villages, of course, had little communication with the central government. They were all, you lived and died in the village, basically, and didn't know anything else. And one day, some 30 Vietnamese soldiers came in and basically abducted her and other people. And she went and, lived with them and served whatever they wanted, etc. And she was basically rewarded when she did good and punished when she did bad, and so she basically became a good worker for them. She was captured by us when they ran across a group of soldiers, and she was carrying weapons and ammunitions for them, but she wasn't actively involved in the fight. But she came into our facility, and I was there where they were talking to her, and I understood most of what they were saying. And the question comes, who's really your enemy? You didn't know who your enemy was. You know, she wasn't really an enemy, but she was enforced in it, and you felt kind of sorry for her and all the other people that had the same situation. So,
Thanks for sharing that with us. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we appreciate you taking your time off to discuss your time in Vietnam with us.
certainly.